Hi folks, and I usually don't make videos like this. I mean, usually I prefer to have a bit of a better setup, but I needed to kind of make this video in a hurry, and that's to warn people about the new firmware update for the GoPro Hero 10. Now, this is my GoPro Hero 10, and this morning I saw that the firmware update from GoPro had been released. This is the one that has new specific settings for extended battery life, high performance settings, and one setting to actually prevent overheating by shutting down Hypersmooth and all that. I mean, it was a bit of a surprise that GoPro were releasing this because their actual scheduled firmware update was November 16th, I believe, and then it got pushed into December. But this was released in kind of a hurry to actually stop the overheating issues that people were reporting. Problem is, the firmware is a bit buggy. As soon as I loaded it onto the camera seemed fine. I was pretty amazed to see the new options when I did the swipe down menu, and I clicked on the battery extended settings, and hey, it listed a lot of settings that I could use, but then I did something interesting. I went into the extended battery settings, and I think it was like the 2.7K resolution, and I wanted to see if a 5K resolution was available. So I adjusted the settings, and yep, 5K was available, and then I decided to restore the settings, and that's when the problem happened. Basically, this camera just kept rebooting and rebooting and rebooting, as if restoring the settings, whatever way this restore is done, it's not compatible with the settings that they've actually kind of released. So that was a huge problem. It just kept rebooting and rebooting non-stop. Now, what I did do then was I obviously reset the camera by holding down the side mode button. And by the way, that's something I want to address to people, because people keep holding down both buttons. You don't hold down both buttons. Holding down both buttons is not how you reset the camera. Holding down the side mode button for 10 seconds is the only button you need. If you press that top button as well, it's doing nothing. The only thing that it's recognizing is this side button. Anyway, that aside, held it down, initiated a reset, camera reset, and immediately kept on rebooting and rebooting and rebooting. So what I did next was I actually downloaded the new firmware, put it on my SD card using an SD card reader on my PC, and attempted a manual firmware update. Now, the camera rebooted about 3 or 4 more times, but then the manual reload of the firmware actually took place. Camera updated. After finished updating, kept rebooting and rebooting and rebooting. So I wasn't happy. I thought I bricked my GoPro. But luckily, I managed to come across a solution, and that is I downloaded the latest version of the GoPro Labs firmware. Now, I'm not actually sure if that's been updated or not, but when I went to the GoPro Labs page, it actually did say October on it, so I'm not sure whether they did actually make a change to it or not. But I downloaded the GoPro Labs firmware, put it on the SD card, put the SD card in the camera, did a manual update, and yep, the camera rebooted about 3 or 4 times before the manual update took place. But once that went through, camera fixed, and as you can see, it's a little bit dirty because I had it mounted on the top of my car, but camera's coming on, no problems. It is not rebooting, absolutely fine. So that seemed to be the fix. So if you're having problems with your camera rebooting, you have to perform a manual firmware update and use that GoPro Labs firmware, or at least that's what worked for me. Now, one thing GoPro did actually ask, and that is if the GoPro Labs firmware was installed on this camera already before attempting the new update, and yep, it was. So it could be a clash between the firmware and the GoPro Labs firmware, unknown, but it just didn't seem to happen until I went into the extended battery settings and tried to restore one of those settings that I changed. So if you're having problems with your GoPro rebooting, download the GoPro Labs firmware and do a manual firmware update. GoPro is looking into it, but who knows how long it will be before they have a solution. If you ask me, it was kind of a rush release, so yeah, it might take a couple of weeks before they pinpoint the problem. Anyway, hopefully you found this solution. It will work for your camera, and you know, if you like what you heard, click that like button and hit subscribe. I'm going to hopefully have some more GoPro tips and news for you shortly. Cheerio.